you playing?
Hello, and welcome to What the Bleep Are You Playing? A podcast where we play video games, many times bad, today is maybe an exception, and we tell you why the bleep we are playing them. I'm the ultimate life form, Sean. I'm here with Thomas, that's who he is. Also, Mason, the blue blur. And today we have a special guest, a man who loves chili dogs, John.
Word.
How you guys doing today?
You think highly of yourself, don't you, Sean? Giving yourself the ultimate life. Wait,
Well-
hold on. Wait, or are you Shadow? Or
Yes,
are you
the person who
Are you
thinks
giant
I'm the
lizard?
ultimate life form,
So
but actually I just have gun and motorcycle.
So you're beaten by lizard.
Exactly. Exactly. I was thinking a lot on how I was going to Thomas's, and then I was like, when I was playing it today, the Eggman song was played, and Thomas mentioned loving the Eggman soundtrack, and I was like, what if I tried to do Thomas?
I got the master plan.
We're going to talk a lot about the soundtrack.
Oh,
So if you don't realize, we have played Sonic Adventure 2. I think all of us played Battle, the Sonic Adventure 2 Battle.
Well, so you guys all had. You guys had the GameCube version, right? Mm-hmm. I
have both. Actually, I have 3 versions.
You have 3 versions. See, I have the GameCube version, but I lined it to Thomas for the purposes of this episode. So I actually played the 360 version.
Okay.
It's backwards compatible with the Xbox One.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It was like $5 on the
Look,
Xbox arcades. So.
I own SA2. I'm not a fake Sonic fan, I promise. But Steam also decided, no, I'm not going to work. Fuck you.
I played my version from 2002, so...
I played my version on the Steam Deck.
No way.
Yeah, so the one on Steam is actually a direct port from the Dreamcast with the option to buy the Battle DLC.
That's how it is on the Xbox.
They did that. I think I'm going to read some of that potentially later on the...
The thing is, though, because I remember there was something weird with my Xbox, and I had to re-download, and then I had to re-download the DLC too. I didn't notice a difference visually.
Well, yeah, so you won't actually notice any difference. The only thing that Battle really adds into it is like the multiplayer competition stuff. But like
Right.
vanilla, it's all the way through.
It's a pretty much one-to-one port. Like, they just basically were like, yep, because legitimately the Dreamcast and GameCube were fairly similar to develop for. They have some big differences, but they were a fairly similar hardware in general.
It's not like SA1 to Sonic Adventure DX, where you can definitely tell there's a lot of differences visually.
Yeah.
So,
But, all right, Sonic Adventure 2. What is Sonic Adventure 2? Well, I'm glad you asked here, because I'm sure all of us here have no idea, but...
yeah, what the fuck's a Sonic?
Get out.
Sonic Adventure 2 is a 2001 platform game developed by Sonic Team USA and published by Sega. Sega! It was the final Sonic the Hedgehog game for the Dreamcast.
It was actually wasn't it like the last game for the game?
It was one of them, yeah, because I'm going to read a review a little bit later on it. Someone was talked about it. I'm glad that it went out, that the Dreamcast didn't go out with like a whimper, that it went out with a huge thing.
Well, they really wanted to, because this was Sonic's 10th anniversary of being around.
Yeah.
Which I do have a surprise for that I can bring out a little later.
They have the development of this game, we'll probably get to it later. They really wanted to go more action.
Yes.
They wanted to do more action because SA1 is very much slower.
It's very adventure-y.
Yeah, it's very much...
it's at the time, remember what the game it's competing against is Mario 64.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So very much honestly, Sonic Adventure is an adventure game. It's you platform around, you kind of solve all these puzzles. I mean, there's
one's got battle in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if SA1 is an adventure game, this is an action game. You run around
this
all
is
the
an
explosions.
edgy emo game because we added Shadow.
It's Sonic for grown.
I'm amazed that we didn't have like an Evanescence song blaring at the, you know,
Almost.
the Bring Me to Life that they, you know, did for the Daredevil trailer.
Yeah.
That was on everything around this time, so I'm surprised that
Shadow going on about how he's the ultimate life form, while What I've Done by Linkin Park starts playing in the background.
Yes, Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog. Wah!
like this game introduced two characters, Shadow the Hedgehog and Rouge the Bat, which became staples. And it splits between two stories. You either play the evil or the good story.
It doesn't say evil.
Oh, sorry.
It says
Dark and hero. I'm sorry. Wikipedia went with the good and evil. I apologize.
Because there are, I like that delineation better because it leaves more gray area and more ambiguity because of how those characters actually play out, not just in later stories, but even in the comics themselves. It's that particular part.
That was something that I kind of picked up on because I started the Dark and finished the Dark story just recently, and I did kind of appreciate how they went with Gun as the enemy, because that's something that both the Dark side and the hero side can go up against, and you don't have to go through the trouble of making
It kind of
separate
builds the
enemies.
trope of, you know, the what we later see in a lot of movies, the versus movies, where you're like, oh, it's so and so, Batman versus Superman, but actually there's a villain behind all of it. You know, Kong versus Godzilla. You know, we actually team up in the end. That trope. Did it start with Sonic? I don't know, but
It probably didn't, but it did it
why I
one of the
gotta break
best
these out.
ways.
Oh boy.
John brought gifts. We're in an audio medium, so here we'll tell you that John brought 10th anniversary comics.
Yeah, so
Fun.
so back when you before you like could set up a pull list with comic shops and stuff, you had to mail order your comics. So you'd fill out this mail order form, and then you'd get them. You'd have to pay with a check.
And you know, one of these comics, issue 125, I believe it is one of my favorite covers in all of Sonic the Hedgehog in general. I love that cover.
So I vigorously collected them. A good friend of mine, Joey Hansen, he introduced me to Sonic when I first moved to New Mexico, and he told me I needed to start reading them. So I bought my first issue of Sonic Comics, issue number 12. That's how old I am.
Wow.
And then I just sort of like kept collecting as the years went on.
So these are the comics that tied in with the Adventure 2 launch.
Yes. So they didn't just do the game as their 10th anniversary. I mean, this was a huge deal for the comics as well because they released tons of media. I got like this huge free poster with it as well for their 10th anniversary. And yeah, this is like the whole story,
I mean, also
starting with like issue 118, and like the covers are all really cool as well. If you can't see them, we'll look them up online because they're pretty dope.
I mean, they definitely can't see them, but yeah.
But the
Visualize.
Put it in your mind's eye.
but they actually, if I remember right, debuted Shadow in the comic before the release of the game.
Oh wow.
Because, well, Shadow, they tried to keep him hidden for a long time.
Yeah, so
In a lot of the trailers,
you get his origin story in here that you don't quite get in that they touch on in the video game.
Yeah, that they kind
Which is a lot through this game. SA2 has a fantastic story.
Yeah, if you wanna flip
Sometimes
through it.
them telling the story doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
tell it in some
I do agree.
They tell it in some very odd ways. I like separating the story. I like playing different, and then you see the fill-in. I like a lot of that. But like, they expect you to know things about the universe in this game.
Which, to be fair, if you're playing the 10th anniversary Sonic game, that's not a
That's
massive
fair.
guess,
But also remember where Sega was at the time.
that's fair.
Like, you're banking on saving basically potentially the company at the time. With the Dreamcast is on its last legs possibly. Who knows what's going to happen? And your huge tentpole franchise game is like this
If you want to look at
to a system that was considered not super welcoming to new players. Like, the Dreamcast is a fantastic system. I legitimately love that system. But it was not great at making new players. It was a very like, oh, if you've played video games, this is the system for you.
Like if you've stuck with Sega,
Yeah.
if you bought a Saturn, This is the this is.
Then
the
we're
console
sorry,
for
and
you.
here's our apology.
Yikes!
But it is, you can definitely see why this game, as good as it is and as well as received it is and how well it sold, probably wasn't the savior that Sega needed at the time. It was because it is very much,
I mean,
despite the fact that, let me tell you, it's not the first Sonic game I'd ever played, but it is the first Sonic game I'd sat down and like played beginning to end. I'd played a bunch of the Genesis games at my neighbor's house as a kid, but this is the first time I sat down and really played a Sonic game, was SA2. So like, as a kid, I still was able to get into it, and obviously I played the GameCube port. I got into the Sonic, but playing it now, I'm like, whoo, there's a lot of things that I'm like, I didn't even know that. I don't know those things as a kid. You know, I didn't know this or this or this, that the storytelling, especially the way it's told, actually kind of do a disservice to this really good story they are trying to tell.
Yeah.
And that could be because of what they try to split it, why they split it up. Because, like, for example, most kids probably started with the hero story because you actually know all the characters on that side. So if you're playing the hero story, just out of
Wait, for all the
nowhere...
people listening, raise your hands if you start off with the hero story. Yeah. Okay, so it's
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
we got all the
Yeah,
hands.
that's
All right, so
everyone
you guys
else.
can see all those hands. All right, continue.
Yeah, because you're going to start with Sonic, like especially if
Yeah.
you're a kid.
Yeah,
No,
especially
I
if you're a
didn't. I
kid.
just started with the dark storyline.
I-
That's because that's because like I was reading the story. I'm like,
That's fair.
dude.
You do.
As I said, I was reading the comics, so when I knew this was coming out, I was like, I got to start here because I want my introduction.
And
to be
honestly,
Shadow.
in the storyline, the Dark is the first in the timeline. Like the start of the Dark starts
Before...
way before the first happens. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
which I guess when you're telling a
It's
story
not-
because you're trying to have like Sonic jumping out of an airplane is the beginning of it, you know, because he's been falsely accused.
But you could play the storylines alternating. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't. The game's set
Yes.
up to where you don't have to just blaze through one side and then the other. You can like go back to the menu and then switch back to the hero side and alternate back and forth. Is it cumbersome? Yes, but it can be done.
Well, that's why there's really good edits on YouTube of like Sonic Adventure 2, the movie, where it's the levels edited together in the chronological timeline. And there's like 4 fucking levels before the beginning, the hero story.
Yeah.
I mean, debatably, because is Knuckles' level before Sonic's?
No,
Like, is
Knuckles
it,
is
no,
2.
No, I know,
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, in timeline?
In timeline, that's what I mean. Because like, is it before his story?
No,
No.
because in the Dark storyline, Eggman frees Shadow. Shadow goes off, and that's what's because he beats the robot that Sonic then fights, and then Eggman goes off and breaks the Master Emerald while Knuckles and Rouge are fighting.
Right.
So they're happening pretty close to simultaneously, but it looks like a little bit after.
Yeah.
Right.
And the really funny thing about it is you mentioned alternating between the two. I think that might have been like how they intended it to play out, because if you play through the hero story throughout like all the levels, you start getting power-ups that then add visually to your character, and then if you start playing the hero story, the the dark story cutscenes will replay like from the past story, and they will have upgrades that they should not have.
Yeah.
And Mason is actually correct. Because originally, this story was not going to be 2 stories. It was going to be a story, one long story, but you would make decisions. Like you would make
kind of consequence based.
kind
Oh, I'm
of
glad they abandoned that.
kind of consequence based, but I feel like there wasn't much on it. It was an idea they had, but
It's an idea that they had that they later shelved and then reused
In Shadow
for
the
Shadow the
Hedgehog.
Hedgehog.
Yeah, they probably ditched it at the time because those kinds of games at that level of development require a lot more programming.
Yeah, and it
And
was,
not to say that Sega isn't great programmers, but when they've branched out to a lot of those things,
They haven't done them well.
it didn't work. But yeah, it was originally going to be like, I'm not entirely sure because there wasn't a lot about it where I found it, but it was probably originally going to be you would start off as, say, Sonic, and then at a certain point you would make a decision like, do you want to keep going with Sonic or do you want to switch over? Do you want to go with Shadow now? And then you'd play with Shadow for a bit, and it's like, do you want to keep with Shadow or do you want to go with Rouge or Knuckles or something like that? Like, I think that's what it was going to be.
I kind of wish they would have almost taken it as a fighting game. in the way that you pick a character and you play through their whole story, and then you piece it all together.
That's
after.
what
I was
Adventure
going to say
did.
so. Adventure
That's
won.
exactly
That's what Adventure
did.
did, and I wish they kind of would have kept. Like, I know that they're trying to set the teams up because sometimes switching between the levels and the type of gameplay. I'm like, I didn't really want to play a Knuckles level or a Tails level. I mean, albeit on replay here, I found myself really liking the Tails and Eggman levels more than I probably did. They slow things down, but also of all the levels, they're the ones that control the best. They have awful camera. The entire game does not have a good camera.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, no.
But
The
the
camera in this game is
controls
atrocious.
actually function 100% the way they're supposed to. Whereas in the other two, there are some issues with some of the controls.
I will give you the Eggman levels.
I mean,
don't-
design-wise, some of the Tails levels aren't great, but I think just from a playing them, I found a lot of enjoyment playing the Tails levels that I know I did not have as a kid.
It's just for me, the Eggman levels are designed so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the Tails levels, they're okay. You storm the base, you run away from the coppers, and you do a space station.
Which
all that.
the amount of tax dollars the U.S. government spent chasing a hedgehog is amazing. There's also a line early on when Shadow gets the first Chaos Emerald that he stole it from the Federal Reserve.
Which you can see play out in Sonic X.
Which I found out that
yeah.
I did not. I was talking to Mason earlier
have those
today,
comics, too.
and I didn't know that they had adapted Adventure into Sonic X. I'd never watched Sonic X, and so I was like, oh really?
Shame on you.
I haven't watched a lot
That's
of the
what
Sonic
I was,
shows.
because I was like, what did you do? What did you do on a Sunday morning if not turn on 4Kids and watch Sonic X before church? Like that's a ritual.
Look,
See, I played on Saturdays where I lived.
I was gonna say,
okay,
I was gonna say where
So-
I lived, it played on Saturdays, and did I watch a lot of it? Yes. Looking back on it, were any of those episodes good?
Wait, you're telling me the
Nope.
baseball episode isn't a classic?
That's honestly the best episode in the series, and that's a problem.
I had a harder time getting into Sonic X, but I really enjoy, especially as time goes on. But part of that is because how I was introduced in Sonic. So I was introduced back in like the '95 Sonic show.
Oh wow!
So-
Yeah. Wait.
like-
Because there were two going on at that time.
Yeah,
weren't
so
there?
was it
which-
Sadam or Adventures, or was it both?
I watched both, but I really liked the Sonic the Hedgehog show because
So-
it followed a lot more of like the comics that I knew, and they took a lot of the stories from the comics and readapted them in that show.
I loved the Sonic
really
movie
cool.
with Metal Sonic. I watched that.
Yes, I have that. The
Because of this
Japanese
game,
one, yeah.
we went out and rented the Sonic movie.
I own it.
Oh, I'm talking back in the day, way back in the
I
day.
mean, it is a
this
pretty.
is talking when Hastings existed.
I mean, it is a pretty fire movie.
It is like
Yeah.
it actually is really good. But that before, because you're talking about all the introduction on that before Adventure 2, I played Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic 2, Sonic 2 over at my neighbor's house, and we also played a lot of Sonic Spinball. Like that was the game. That's probably the game that before Adventure 2
Yes.
I had the most hours poured into of a Sonic game.
See, and I started playing Sonic Spinball on the PC.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
It's one of the best pinball games ever to come out.
It really is.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a great mechanic game, and maybe there'll be an episode on pinball games later. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I played PC games like long before well, that's not true. So I started off on the NES, but I quickly migrated to PC games because my parents wanted to have a nice computer. So we played all the DOS video games that came out, and and then we just sort of like kept upgrading. My parents eventually bought us like a gamepad, but it was so old that USB ports really weren't a thing, so it was a
Oh, wow.
serial port gamepad.
Yikes!
But
Yeah, so I played. I played a lot of those old first PC games that ever came out that looked better there than they did on the console.
So I think it's pretty clear that all of us, when playing this game, had at least some background before jumping into this game.
Yeah, that's what I was-
So this game,
Yeah.
kind of similar to what we were talking about last episode about the VeggieTales game, was
Yeah.
the game was already ready for us. Like we were
Oh,
like, oh
yeah,
yeah, we're
absolutely.
in. Even though I said I probably among all of us, I think I had the least Sonic experience going into this game of everybody here. But even then, I was like, this game is still I have enough knowledge of Sonic to know what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And then a lot of the story points I would piece together later as, oh, that's why that was in there. Oh, that's why they did that.
Imagine being a child and not knowing a lot about this game, because not a lot of children. Okay, one of my favorite things about this game are the ads, because
Oh my
they
god.
Sega ads in general are hilarious.
but they tried to hide Shadow like really well. Like I think one of the best
By
ones,
showing shadows of him.
at the but like I forget what show it was, but I think it was the end of a Sega show where they had 10 days and it was all dedicated to SA2. And like everyone, they would show like a different thing. Every day they'd show a different thing. And the final day, they had this big trailer. It showed Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman. Showed all their gameplay, and it's like, yeah, another adventure. And then all of a sudden, the screen would go like staticky, and there would be like cryptic messages, and you would see an outline of a dark hedgehog, and everyone was like, what the fuck is that? Like, and like, why do we need it now?
I mean, in a lot of ways, at this point, I know Wario did exist in Nintendo, but Wario really wasn't in games for Nintendo, like actual like adventure games. Like he had been in some of the like tennis and golf games and things like that. There was the one Japanese game where he threw a bucket on Mario's head and you had to be the fairy going around.
Oh yeah.
Great game.
He
Great game.
He was in Mario Land 2.
And he was
That's
in some
about
of that,
it.
yeah. There's very limited Wario. So the fact that there was a dark version of your mascot in a game, because Wario's never the dark version. Like you kind of saw, like
he's more an asshole.
yeah,
than just
more of an
the
asshole,
dark
and he
version.
would, you know, a couple years later, WarioWare would become really popular. The idea of a dark version of your character hadn't really been done a ton in your mascot games, like your Mario, your Crash Bandicoot, your
Nobody talk about Mirror Link.
you know. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, when did Dark Link get it?
When did
Dark Link was Ocarina of
So
Time,
Dark Link
but
would have
that's-
been, but that even then, it's a whole different concept as well.
Plus, Dark Link is just for like one stage, like it's one boss fight. Shadow is throughout the whole.
Yeah, and that it's an actual like antithesis to Sonic, or being billed as an antithesis to Sonic, is something that this genre hadn't necessarily seen a ton at the time, especially in your big mascot platform games. The game that's supposed to sell your system.
Yeah,
you don't usually like this game. Is very different than what you would usually do to try to sell your system.
Yeah.
Now, after this, there were just oodles and oodles of dark counterparts.
In a lot of ways,
Everything.
Sonic kind of started some of that, jumped into it at exactly the right time, because it came out in what, 2001, and after that you're starting to hit that everything had to be dark in like 2004 to 2007.
Yeah.
Everything had dark. Jack and Daxter went from a lighthearted game to, oh my gosh, Jack is dark. You had obviously Prince of Persia getting its dark, being
Two
darkened up.
Thrones.
You had all these different things. Like these things became. It wasn't cool to have it. And this game isn't dark per se, but this game is very early 2000s edgy.
It will never not crack me up that Jack and Daxter, canonically, his first words he ever says is, "I'm gonna kill Praxis." That is his
So
first
good.
words.
Do you think Sam Raimi was a fan of this game? Do you think he kind of looked at that and went, I know?
Well, John Carpenter was. John
Oh,
Carpenter loves Sonic the Hedgehog, which will never not make me laugh.
So the weird thing for me is like I feel like a lot of like the three of you approached this game from people that had mostly experienced the other Sonic games, and that's how you were coming into this. Whereas mine was like, yeah, I'd played the Sonic games, but the friends that I had and like the group that I was in, we were all deeply into the comics. Like we were deep into the weeds of reading all the issues that we could of Sonic. And then seeing this game came out, it was less about like the gameplay and wanting to see how they like told this particular story, because we had been like leading up to it in the comics for a while.
Which is probably why you picked the dark story first.
Yeah.
Because you had a little bit of knowledge.
Because I was familiar with his origin story, and I just was like, okay, I got to know how they play it out and how much of that is included. And granted, the comic has way more exposition on his origin
I'm
story.
which
Yeah.
you might have been waiting for longer, if not for a bit of a goof. Originally, Shadow and Rouge were actually going to be hidden for a long time, like longer than usual. That didn't happen because Resource Toy Company accidentally leaked them as part of their Sonic Adventure toy line.
Wow.
So Sega was like, God damn it, and they had to release the characters.
Guess we got to do it now.
That's basically it, which I found that out today,
In
and that's fucking
fairness,
hilarious.
probably helped the game sales
yeah.
a bit. Not that Adventure was a bad selling game. Like, Adventure sold very well, but like I can imagine that this would have been like a reason to get the sequel. Because as I said, Adventure is a fine game. Adventure 2 is a much better game.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot more streamlined and less faffing about trying to figure out where you need to go next.
I mean,
Yeah,
they
that's-
cut out Amy and Big's gameplay section, so
Oh.
they cut out Mario and fishing.
Who else?
So on the Dreamcast version, Biggs is actually in the Dreamcast version of Adventure. So like that was one of the things that I was really confused about. So like I started replaying this game, and I was telling my wife like as we were playing, I was like, "Oh yeah, look, they threw in little references to Biggs on the Dreamcast. I forgot about that." She's like, "Who's Biggs?" That guy right there. You don't know Biggs? She's like, no, I don't know who Biggs. How the hell do you not know Biggs?
How do you not
And
know?
she's like, well, I played Sonic Adventure. Like, he was never in it. It's like, and I had to look it up. It's like, oh, because he's not on the GameCube, and I played the Dreamcast version.
They did cut some things in the GameCube version, which again is why, despite it's the version that I played and prefer in a lot of ways, there's a reason why it was actually received lower than the Dreamcast version. Also, it was a 2-year-old game at the time. The
Yeah.
game had already been out.
Look.
And so a lot of its flaws that maybe at launch people were like, oh, it's fine, but a few years later sitting on them, you might not be as kind to it. Weirdly, this might be what the whole purpose behind our podcast is. How do you review a game years later?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I know you guys are reading a lot of this stuff from like different sources you read, which is great. I mean, there's more information than what I knew, but like I'm pulling from like what I lived at the time, because like all my friends were hardcore Sonic fans. Like even my cousin, like that was the whole reason why he bought the Dreamcast. And I just remember going to visit him so that we could like play Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 and stuff.
Dreamcast was a great system.
Yeah.
The Dreamcast was a really good system if you like those arcade kind of games.
Yep.
But it was also a really good system that was easy to pirate and didn't have a DVD player.
When
It didn't have a DVD player, and I mean it was the first to go online. It was the first system that had an online setup. Well, the first home console that did.
when did PS2 come out?
It was PS2 had to add it later. PS2 added it as a response to the Xbox. Because PS2 did get the feature, but they added it later.
What about the NES? NES had dial-up capabilities.
There were dial-up capabilities on that one,
So
but
did the Genesis.
the
I was gonna
Dreamcast
say
had
with
the
the
first
Genesis.
setup
Genesis-
in the system.
The Genesis did have the Sega channel.
So if you flip over the bottom of the NES, you'll see like this weird sort of like block patch in there. And it's because that was meant to be removed, and you could put in a network adapter in there.
Oh, wow.
And so you could take it online. But it never really made it to the US, but its popularity was mostly in Japan. I collect a lot of like retro stuff too. So.
Japan gets all the cool stuff.
Because obviously the
Yeah.
Dreamcast was the first to have a console-based MMO.
And game updates. Let's not forget that. Like they were the first one
The
to do game
Dreamcast was
updates for
the
online.
Dreamcast was ahead of its time, and a lot of its features would later be utilized on the Xbox.
Yes.
As the Xbox was making their things, and in a lot of ways, it's why the Xbox survived, or was able to become the juggernaut that it was.
Funny you should mention that. There was at one point when the Xbox was coming out and when the Dreamcast was kind of on its way out, that Sega tried to make a deal with Microsoft to try to make the Xbox backwards compatible with the Dreamcast.
Yep.
I remember that.
Because and the big thing, talking about the console wars that it came from this and all other things, is the fact that this game, that Sonic Adventure 2, would be playable on a Nintendo. As
Yeah,
someone
it's
who
huge.
grew up in the time of the Nintendo Sega rivalry
Yeah.
and everything on that, the fact that the moment the Dreamcast died, they immediately were like, "Hey Nintendo, can we port our games over to your system?"
Is that the first? Were those were Adventure DX and Adventure 2 Battle the first ones?
Yep.
It was- they were
because
the-
they had to quickly, basically Sega had to make a quick decision of, all right, we are probably out of the console market forever, or at this point now it looks like forever. Who knows? Every year there's a rumor coming.
Yes.
Oh, they're thinking about getting back in the console.
They talk
probably
about
not. But
Just Dreamcast
but
2, baby.
to become a
buy it.
software only, this came to the GameCube, and then they started making games for all systems. But yeah, it was like to immediately make a deal with Nintendo was just like mind-blowingly crazy because of all of the advertising and the fighting that came from Sega versus Nintendo back in the day. The Genesis
First console wars.
and you hear a lot of like the console wars now that people are very, very stuck in whatever console they want to play. It has nothing on just the hilariousness of the way people treated the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo.
Oh, the commercials around that time were
Yeah.
fantastic.
They had literally a lot of times them fighting.
People died in the streets over this.
Yeah, the Genesis does what Nintendo
Don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was.
But I would like, speaking of which, I'm interrupting, but I also have to make a correction of something you guys said in one of your earlier
Oh, what did we-
episodes. You said that the Genesis has better graphics. It does not actually have better graphics than the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo has the better graphics.
I don't remember
card.
us even saying that.
I was gonna say, what the fuck episode was that?
I can't
It might have been
There's like
the
episode-
movie podcast, movie episode.
That might have been
It
it.
might have been.
'Cause we were talking-
yeah, 'cause I can't remember.
So the difference was, if I remember right, the clock speed of the Genesis was faster than the Nintendo. So they were able to like play games at a higher frame rate and play games at a higher speed, which is kind of how you get Sonic.
And then didn't the Genesis have a bigger color palette? Because the Super Nintendo could only do 16 colors.
Yeah,
right?
it's because they eventually so it was also a 16-bit system, but they did have a 32-bit adapter.
That's right.
And the CD.
Yeah, that was a later, but that only attached to the Master System, which wasn't like as common. So the problem was so they moved from those what are they called, the RF cables, to like a super component cable with the 32-bit. But again, the biggest problem they had is it required 1,000 fucking cables to use because you needed a power cable and you needed the RF adapter for the Sega Genesis. Then you needed a power adapter and an S video cable for the 32-bit. So you had like more than like twice the amount of
Just
cables
the way you're
going in.
describing it sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. I have both of them. If you ever want to see them, I can bring them in.
Look, you ever
Because I
just
have all of it.
like you ever want like a good breakdown of those? Just watch the AVGN episode on the 32X or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's a very good
It really
breakdown of
is.
just how much bullshit was behind that.
So that was where they could go up to like 32-bit, but like Nintendo had the better graphics and the better sound card.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Sound-
you can tell the difference between the Super
Sound-
Nintendo and the
The
Genesis.
sound card is
The only real difference was the processor clock speed of the Sega Genesis. That's what made it
There was
faster.
also the element with the Sega Genesis, and this is not necessarily with the Genesis versus Nintendo, but what they were willing to show. And because Sega went more with the mature audience and a lot of those sort of things, they also did a lot of the Mortal Kombat photorealistic graphics and photorealistic over kind of
Yeah.
setup on those things, which now did not age as well. But at the time, you're like, oh my gosh,
It was
those
amazing.
are better graphics.
But also just like, so you're also talking about the ports, but like, so when they developed those originally, they were for arcade. And if you ever played the arcade version of them, they look phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Just unbelievably good.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the ports didn't quite translate over as well.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
just-
also think this is a good time to talk about one of the important development things of Sonic Adventure 2.
okay.
Which is the game was designed to run at 60 frames per second. So I don't know if like a lot of games, like modern games, will run at 30 frames per second. You hear some things about like with the PS5 and such that they're able to do like a performance mode of 60 frames per second. But they actually were so much reliant on the 60 frames per second for Sonic Adventure 2, they actually tied the game speed. So like they developed it for the game speed to be at 60 frames per second. So if you ever play the game in a lower frame rate, Sonic and everybody else are slower than shit.
Really?
Like, and just as like a demonstration, like, this is one of the cool things about being able to play it on the Steam Deck is you can limit the frame rate.
Oh, really?
And you can see the difference.
But the clock is still moving on it, so like the time is all moving up at the top and everything.
Yeah, so the game's moving is normal. It's just the game speed is actually slower.
Oh dear.
But yeah,
30 right
yeah.
here. So this is the first level.
Oh, jeez.
It's like
That's ridiculous.
now it's so
That's significantly...
yeah, so that's what I mean by like they tied the game speed to it. So you up it to like 60 where it's designed, so you can see the
Yeah,
60
there it is.
right
There it is at 60. And then, yeah, it's at the right speed. That's how fast it's supposed to be.
which is, I think, probably a way they were trying to push the feeling of speed in a game, because as we've talked about, that the first adventure at times feels slow.
That was a unique thing that they were trying to do to make sure.
If anybody's played, obviously, the Genesis games, Sonic is fast.
Oh.
My favorite part of the new movie, the second movie, is the fact that he's running through the temple and not ignoring everything, just going through fast, because that's how I played Sonic games.
Yeah, and Sonic has always like been fast, but that was one way to like they tied it to that to basically I don't necessarily want to say trick, but they took advantage of a particular thing that like the Dreamcast was able to do
To make
in
you
order
feel that
to
speed.
make you feel it faster. Because like I don't know if you've ever played even like the Spider-Man game that came out. They did like a PS5 like an enhanced edition. You can set the game to 60 frames, and it makes you feel like he's like swinging through faster. It's because the frames are moving smoother. So they made it faster by tying like that like double speed that Sonic's doing to make him also appear smoother in the process.
Which is why it's really damn good this game doesn't drop frames.
They did some really ingenious programming stuff to make it look the way it does.
Albeit that also, I don't know if that would tie necessarily, but the speed of this game, and it feels great, but that's also where some of the platforming problems come into this game.
Yes.
There are times where you feel like you're on ice.
Yeah.
And the platforming elements of the game, some of it, and as a lot of the reviews at the time are, some of it's just because the camera is just not good at all. It doesn't let you
My
move all
biggest
the
problem
way.
is with the targeting system.
The targeting
system, most of the platforming is pretty much centered around it, and it is it just doesn't. It's inaccurate.
Specifically with like Sonic and Shadow, the targeting system when you're like having to platform up and like do that zoom dash, just blows monkey chunks.
One of the biggest issues that I had is with the levels closer to the end that are more like grind centered, that are centered around the grinding mechanic in the game.
We gotta climb up to where the grinds are.
Yeah, and then and like the rails that you gotta grind on are like that small, and the moving is so
and your hitbox to get on the grind, the rails
very
is very
tiny.
small,
Drop it
and you
down
can
to
miss
30
it.
frames per second. You'll be
and
fine.
you'll play the game in slow motion.
I
That'll make it
also
better.
noticed, specifically on the boss, I noticed the most on the boss, the Eggman Golem, the Golem.
Yeah,
would go back.
Oh my
and I noticed that like the problem on it is a lot of the camera and you can't there, but when I'd make the correct jump, and I would do it to get over there, I would still slide at the end of it just enough because I'm going fast enough to try to run around because you're trying to avoid attacks and run. That the platforming, you still slide too much. You still move too much. I should be able to hit and move.
Which is, it's kind of hilarious that that is one of both the most pain in the ass and easiest bosses in the game.
Yeah.
Depending
the
on
one
the story.
boss
It's the shortest one,
It's the
too.
one that requires the most platforming, and it has the I spent 16 minutes on that.
I was on 11 and a half.
On one life. I never
died. Yes, same. It was 11 and a half
Okay,
for me.
I will admit, I died once because of the BS platforming, but then like after that, I was like, oh, I got this.
I never died
I
on
was like,
it,
I
but-
figured it out after that, and
But
I was
it's-
like,
it's hilarious.
I
It's
beat him in
hila-
like 4 or 5 minutes.
It's hilarious that, as Sonic, it's a pain in the ass. Like, everyone knows, it's a pain in the fucking ass boss. Arguably the worst one in the game. As Eggman, it's a breeze because
It
literally
really
all
is.
you
It
do
really
is shoot. Yeah, all you do is
so to
press
be
the
fair,
shoot
I was
button.
playing as Eggman, so maybe that's
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah,
that's
Eggman-
try doing that boss as Sonic.
Yeah,
It's-
the Sonic boss
You will
makes it a
pull your
lot
hair
harder.
out.
Because as Sonic, you have to platform your way up and hit it, which is why, look, I'm not saying the Dark Story is overall the better story, but it has the better version of that boss fight because
does.
it has Sonic jumping up, slow motion, kicking the thing to control its head and going, Teddy-ah!
One of the
Oh,
things
yeah.
that's really cool about this game, and this is kind of moving over a little bit, is that at the time, obviously, you know, we're coming off of Mario 64, Sonic Adventure. The more open, wander around platformers are becoming popular. And obviously, Adventure is kind of that.
Yep.
Getting away from that, but still keeping your environments looking so good. Even the bad levels, when I'm around in these levels, I'm just in awe of how cool the level design is in this.
Oh, yeah,
Some of them
absolutely.
haven't aged, like some of the graphics on it haven't necessarily aged as great, but all of the level designs are really cool.
I would still say it levels great, and maybe that's because I'm playing on PC. That's like
It still looks good. No, it still looks
Like-
good because I was playing it on the GameCube. It looks good. Some of them have just like you're like, okay, that does look like a 2000s, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
the only thing that I feel like is 2000s is like the soundtrack and.
Oh my god.
But the soundtrack is
Yeah,
good.
I'm not- yeah, but it's also the soundtrack of that particular time period.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, why it's good because it's, I mean, part of it's nostalgia.
The other part is because it's fucking good.
Yeah, but the other thing is like on the PC you can play it at 1080p, so it looks great.
But like
I mean-
even the infuriating levels, like the Knuckles and the Rouge levels, it can be
Oh,
just
yeah.
at times.
Well, it's because like camera angles really
Yes.
haven't developed. I would argue at that particular time, like game development has come a really long way.
They're
Like camera angles has been the bane of game development until maybe 2014.
Yeah, very recently.
'Cause-
Very recently.
Especially for 3D platformers and especially around this era, just
But if you
the
com-
camera just was not good.
But if you
And, like,
compare it to like film, like the history of film, when you look at like how even they developed from black and white to color to silence to talking and all those things, and you had to evolve your storytelling, and some of that like being able to tell stories is camera angles, cinematography has the same thing, but you look at where they were in say like the 1920s and where we are now. And you compare that to like where video games have been in like gameplay, storytelling, and where they're at now. Like Sonic Adventure 2 is a pretty good sweet spot of you are trying some new things that a lot of people have built upon, and we've gotten to this awesome spot in video games because you took the balls to do what you did.
That's very
yeah,
fair.
this is a
yeah.
very
Oh yeah, and again, my biggest problem with the camera is that when I try to look around, it goes back.
It just
like
flicks right
I
back.
I want to be able to spin or mold around, and there had been games at the time that did allow you to do full 360 spins and look at everything around you, and it stayed on it.
Mario 64 did
Mario
that.
64, Spyro the Dragon are the two that I like a lot of those things, but it doesn't mean that like the levels. It's not bad enough that the levels are unplayable at times. Like there are moments where you have to take leaps of faith, because you can't turn the camera, which is actually in certain levels actually really conducive to the experience because you're like, okay, I probably wouldn't actually be able to see whatever is all this in
Yeah,
there. So it can also be very, very infuriating. The space levels, for example, the camera is an absolute detriment to the game at times in those.
Yeah, Mad Space and Meteor Herd, all the Knuckles and Rouge levels, honestly. It's funny because they're
thing that-
arguably my favorite characters in the game. I love
To
Knuckles
be fair,
and
I
Rouge.
also didn't like the Knuckles levels in the first Sonic Adventure either.
They're
They're
fetch levels.
I didn't mind them in the first Sonic Adventure because one, they're a lot smaller. Like they're a lot smaller,
fair.
and the radar fucking works. Because in SA2, it's locked to whichever emerald piece. Like it's locked to 1, 2, 3. In the original adventure, you can
Just
locate
any of them.
Yeah. But in this one, you can search the whole last level, find the first one, and
then
then
have to go
back
back and not realize that you
it's
missed
like,
it, yeah.
Motherfuck.
It is definitely that way. I mean, and I will say that in the Knuckles levels and the Rouge levels, the camera bothers me the least in those levels. it's more of just how they're set up.
Yeah.
Actually, where the camera bothered me the most is in the Tails and the Eggman levels, because that's where I noticed the camera locking in certain parts. I'm like, I want to go back a step. So there's a Tails point where you're going and you have a split in the road, and you need to go this way. And if you go this way, the highway falls down, and you realize you can't jump over that. And you need to go back, and there is a power-up. But to go back and get the power-up, the camera will never let you go behind and find it, so you can never actually look at the power-up.
So you have to run towards
You have to
the
run, and you have to hope that it actually is there, or there's something there. And that ability, because the levels are made that you need to sometimes go back and forth a little bit, go backwards, but the camera is only going down, like you're going down a hallway and you're not allowed to turn around and go back the other way, despite the level design telling you to go back the other way.
Invisible wall cameras really bothered me.
Yeah.
But that's also not just a Sonic Adventure
Oh, it's
2
not.
thing. That's honestly like a game development thing that happened at that particular time. You know, Lara Croft had the same issues with that as
Tomb
well.
Raider has miserable camera work in the old games.
Oh, yeah.
But we've referenced it a few times in there as the old Tomb Raider games. Maybe we will eventually play them, but we've referenced a couple times. Those games haven't aged particularly well because of their camera and controls, but they still are good games.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing is like button presses, like response times. I would say have changed. Like I feel like everyone sort of expects a different response time now. And again, I feel like the PC makes up for a little bit of this deficit, being able to have more instantaneous
I don't know.
button presses.
I didn't really get that much controller delay when I was playing
Same.
it, but that could also be because, look, I'm not going to answer the question now because it's not the end of the podcast. Probably not by a long shot. We could talk about this game forever. But there's a lot of, especially with older games, there's the distinction: has this game aged poorly with controls and everything, or am I just bad? With this game, I'm just fucking bad. I am trash at SA2.
I would actively admit that I'm bad too.
I was willingly streamed my badness to the world, so
That's, you know what, that's
people
fair.
could literally watch me be bad at this.
I feel like I did pretty well.
I got to see you spend 30 minutes on the Rouge level.
38 minutes, and then Thomas is like, why don't you just reset the level? You can start back over and look for him. And I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. Reset the level. And I found all three in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I ever spent that much time on any level.
Yeah.
Average was about, for every level, was about 10 to 12 minutes on a level. Was about 4 on it. There was a few that I went quite a bit faster on, and there's a few I went quite a bit
I would say
longer.
my average is probably between 7 and 8 minutes.
Yeah, probably around 7 to 8 for some levels. The Sonic and Shadow levels obviously go by faster. Even if I am still... Look, Sonic's jungle level, I forget what it's called, Green Forest or whatever. Fuck me. Like, that's not a... I'm bad at that level. It's a kick-ass...
That's an easy level. Come on.
I mean, those early Sonic levels and
Shut
some
the
of those...
fuck up. Motherfucking Go Vacation ass. That's an easy level. Go Vacation's a good game.
You're never gonna live that down, are you?
I'm not.
Until the next time that they make us play a Wii game. To go back to what Thomas is saying, though, I think something about like the early Sonic and Shadow levels, especially the early Sonic levels, though, they are very much built like classic Sonic levels in that there's lots to do in the levels, but if you just want to run through the level as fast as you can do that. Now, the later Sonic and Shadow levels, the game slows down quite a bit and are more precision, but the early ones are built that way. And then the Rouge and Knuckles levels are very much built in, at the time, what platforming was. That's why the camera, I think, does work a little better, because they are meant more wide open. And then
It did have a kind of a Banjo-Kazooie
It
feel
does,
to
very
it.
much. I was going to say Donkey Kong Country, so Rare. Or Donkey Kong 64, Rare on that. And then the Tails and the Eggman levels are more of like the hallway walking down it. That's why the camera is at its absolute worst, I feel, in those, because it is trying to be a straight, despite the fact that they tell you to go back several times. It's a lot of just you're going down a hallway.
There was legit I love the level. I love the first Eggman level.
Oh, you're
The
just
first
destroying
Eggman-
a military base. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
the first Eggman level is great, but there was a moment where I'm just standing there and the gate's not opening, and I'm like, I've destroyed all the enemies. What's going on?
You have to go
I'm
back and get that rocket.
Yeah, so I'm jumping up. Not the rocket, no. I actually knew that one. Although that was one where I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. But that was only like 5 seconds before I realized that this is a whole 30 seconds. I'm jumping around. Where the fuck do I go? What do I do? And there's one enemy in the corner because the camera hit it, and I was like, fuck.
That
me.
happens a lot of them. Yeah, that happened a lot to me. Especially in the Sonic in space level that controls the door.
No,
controls.
at the Mad. What the hell is it? Mad Gear's Sonic 4.
If you want a game that's basically like the Dr. Robotnik levels but better, it's Project Number 3 on the GameCube.
Yeah, that game was good. I remember that
It's
game.
very similar to that Dr.
was.
Robotnik type of gameplay.
Yeah.
But it was designed as a not quite a rail shooter, but like a third-person shooter game with a strong female protagonist.
It was a fun game.
It was like Bayonetta before Bayonetta.
Piano 3? Is that
Yeah,
what it is?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
Project
Piano
Number
3.
3.
It's a good game.
So kind of going back to like how this game works and the sort of technological advances that you were bringing up earlier. I want to discuss the cutscenes.
Okay.
Now, hold on. Credit where credit's due. This was the first Sonic game to incorporate mocap. And from my understanding, it's also the only Sonic game to incorporate mocap.
Yes.
And for what it is, that's a pretty big deal, I think, to incorporate mocap in video games that hadn't really been touched on. That being said, these cutscenes are probably some of the worst cutscenes ever in any video game. They're somehow worse than in one.
I heavily fucking disagree.
I wouldn't call them worst ever, but they aren't good, and some of that's also just because the sound mixing is
Sound
really
mixing.
The
bad.
sound mixing's god awful.
I would give you
Like,
that.
I will give you that. The
Not
sound
only
mixing's god
is
awful.
the sound mixing bad, this is also kind of part of that. The animations are synced up with the Japanese dub.
Well, that's normal.
So you're you're constantly getting like characters' lines reading like they keep interrupting each other.
Mason has not played many Japanese games for the time of that because I was going to say, now, graphically, yes, there are a lot of things in that, considering that literally the same year this was released, or even the year before, Final Fantasy X came out on the PS2, and is just so much better graphically, especially in cutscenes, even though it does have a lot of the same lip flap issues and not fully syncing up with the voices. My problem with the cutscenes in this game at times was that everything goes really fast, and it's a blink and you can miss something really easily during the cutscenes. Where a lot of other games would would try to slow down their cutscenes a bit to tell the story. They're like, no,
but you'd have to go down to 30 frames per second to do that.
Exactly.
See, okay. I do agree that the sound mixing and the cutscenes are bad.
I still love the cutscenes.
I was going to say, I don't really care. Look, one of my favorite bits in all of Sonic is a really small bit from one of these cutscenes. And it is the Egg Golem boss fight, which we've established is not a good boss fight. But, Eggman is like, Sonic, I'm going to kick your fucking ass with the Egg Golem or
the
whatever.
line is
And he
like-
uses those exact words, too.
No, I think the actual line is, I'm going to take your life as well as the Chaos Emeralds, which is
That's
like,
right,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ.
Look, Eggman has some pretty menacing lines in the
He
Adventure
holds
series.
the president of the United States hostage.
Which,
He holds Amy at gunpoint.
but
And then
does
he yells
happen.
at you, he's like, Sonic, get across my level and come find Amy. Why are you taking so long? I'm like, well, you designed this labyrinth of a place.
Yeah, he
You've
straight up
got
says,
the gun, just shoot her
he
already.
straight up says, Sonic, if you don't come here soon, Amy will die.
I'm like, gravity is hard.
But again, like being someone from the comics, like that's totally germane with his character.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I think he's already tried to unleash Ixis Nagus, which is just a horrible villain. Like by horrible, I mean like arguably more dangerous than Eggman. And Eggman like takes a step back, like, oh, I done fucked up.
It's kind of like what they would do in Sonic Heroes with the giant when Metal Sonic turns into the giant.
Well,
dragon.
Ixis Nagus is like this fucking wizard dude.
Yeah.
Is he like a troll or something? Like, what the fuck is
I don't know. He's also got a hook for a hand.
he? Yeah. But like,
These comics are weird.
But that's the thing is
they're
like
great, but
when
they're
I
strange.
like
But
coming from like as a kid, I've had a hard time parsing out like what I know versus like what I'm experiencing and what other people are experiencing. As an adult, I feel like I'm not necessarily great at it, but a little bit better at it. And being able to look back at that and go like, oh, like I really integrated those two stories, which makes my experience very different from everybody else.
but and again, like, look, you say the SA1 cutscenes are better than this game. No.
No. I'm saying SA. Oh yeah, SA1 is better. That is what I said.
No.
Yeah, I agree.
No.
I think that.
No, you can't have a wrong opinion, but that is a wrong opinion.
They're just.
Wait, let's. You can have a wrong opinion. Like, let's just say that you can't.
Look,
If there's objectivity,
If
like,
your
you can
opinion
have-
is that these cutscenes are that,
look.
that's not what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to bully Mason. I'm honestly not. But at the same time,
Until
the
he
SA1.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Look,
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
How's your gut feel? You get punched yet? Do you
Yeah,
feel out
I'm
of
starting.
breath?
I'm starting to.
but look, the SA1 cutscenes aren't good.
no.
Because the fact is, they have like these fucking Muppet mouths in that. Like they have these big ass fucking Muppet mouths in the cutscenes in SA1.
Yeah,
And
I do remember
just-
the mouths being.
They just don't look
weird.
good. I'm sorry.
In
Like,
SA2, the mouth work, I commented a bunch while playing it on the stream and everything. The lip flaps actually aren't awful on like Sonic and Shadow, and they're
Man, they're
okay.
really bad.
But Tails, I don't think they could figure out how to get it because he has the longer nose and everything like that. They could figure out how the mouth. So his mouth opens up to like a big circle and then down, and a big circle and then
then
down,
down.
and
Yeah.
it looks like he's trying to suck someone's face off as he talks.
Hey, don't knock it till you tried it.
That's fair.
What?
Uh,
What?
But-
What?
I mean, like they're
That was very out of pocket.
yeah, like the SA1 cutscenes. They do have some bits I like. Like I like that Sonic and a lot of the characters have fangs. Mm-hmm. I know that's
Yeah.
a thing that they do have in this game, but I like that they have fangs. But this game, I just think the cutscenes are better because of the mocap. Like, is it perfect? No, and I will give you that. But again, one of my favorite bits after Eggman brings out the 8 Golem is like, I'm gonna kill you, Sonic. Haha, I'm the fat fuck, and that's what I am. I am the fat fuck. I got the master plan. Sonic does this Bruce Lee nose wipe and does like the stance, and I'm like, that's Sonic.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
shit. You know, like
it's
Well, so maybe what we're parsing out is like the actual like substance of the cutscenes is really good, but what we're maybe talking about is maybe like technicality.
The presentation.
Yeah,
the
presentation.
See,
I think that's-
technicality of it isn't necessarily where it could have been.
Combining the presentation with like this, it's like watching a Bruce Lee movie performed by mascots.
Okay. Not gonna
A,
lie. I'm
would
going
watch.
to give, I was gonna say not gonna lie. I'll give you
I
that
think
if
there's
only
a word
because
for
I
that. Isn't
want
it
to
called
watch
chibi?
that.
Yeah,
I think
that's what it's like. That is what it's like.
I will give you that if only because now I want to see like Grizzy, the mascot, doing like Bruce Lee-esque moves in the movie.
No, what you really need to do if you want that, if you got to go all the way back to like, was it like issue 6 of Sonic the Hedgehog in the comics, where they actually have like a very brief Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover
Yeah, they
Oh,
do.
that's funny.
They do because Archie owned both comic
at the
licenses.
time. See,
And
yeah,
I remember that.
there's
'cause-
just like a one panel where all 4 turtles like are like, hey man, I think we're in the wrong comic strip.
I was gonna say because
That's really funny.
Sonic's running in the sewers. Because I think I've read this issue. He's running in the sewers and he's like, I gotta get back to Princess Sally and all that. And the turtles are just in the background, like,
Yep.
dude, I think we're in the wrong comic. Like,
Yep.
It's a great,
is that
it's a great
hedgehog?
cameo.
What was in this pizza?
One of the things that I noticed while playing through this game is
The lack of genitalia and the furry implements in them. I really thought that's where you're going.
is that also how you watch the new Planet of the Apes as well? You know, you're wondering, hey, where are the monkey balls?
There is
yeah, John
the
just
most
watched.
Rule 34 stuff is for Sonic.
That's fair. That's fair.
It was almost invented force.
So Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. People watch this and they're like, all right, the internet's here now. We're just getting DSL. Let's go. We're going to...
Many fan fictions were born.
DeviantArt blew up.
Look, as soon as Rouge got announced, it was like, what the fuck? What's happening?
Rouge's design is just so ludicrous. Like,
Yeah.
I actually like her as a character. Like, she's a good antithesis to Knuckles.
Oh, I love Rouge as a
legitimately
character.
is. But God, the design in this game specifically, she's 9/10 boobs.
Well, you know, that's...
And sometimes the animation isn't always there, like, or the design isn't always there, and they did, she's just like, all boobs in a shot, and I'm like, oh,
So
what?
again, she was introduced in the comics beforehand. So like my introduction was this again very voluptuous character in the comics that I was like, ooh, who's that?
So that's where all the fanfics came from.
It's just John.
But I think
If you listen closely as John is flipping through pages, some of them are about to sound very sticky.
Oh, fuck. God damn it.
You know, for them not,
All right.
for me not having these like bagged and boarded at the time, I feel like I kept them in pretty good condition.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
had
fair
Kleenexes.
enough.
So,
Speaking of Rouge, while I have, just kind of a fun fact, Rouge was not her original name. Originally, she was not going to be a counterpart to Knuckles, but Tails, at least in name, and it was going to be, her name was going to be Nails. Like,
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
I will say, thank God they changed it to be Knuckles and Rouge, because that is legit my favorite relationship in the Sonic series. But also, Shadow's name was originally different. It was a Japanese name. I'm probably
Evil Sonic.
Evil Sonic.
I'm probably gonna pronounce
Walu Sonic.
Wanik. I'm probably pronouncing this wrong. It was a Japanese name named Terios, which was
Terios.
derived from Terasu, which meant to compete with or shine on. Which, considering Shadow's character, yeah, it's actually a very decent name. That being said, thank God they changed it to Shadow, because imagine, like, my name is Terasu the Hedgehog. What are you, a fucking soup?
It's gonna be, I wonder if there was anything with, Terry being a name in multiple fighting franchises.
No, Terry Bogard. that might be it.
Might be
yeah.
something on it, but I think
Although
that you're talking about the counterparts on this, that Rouge versus Knuckles, Sonic, Shadow. While I like the levels and I like Tails in this game, he's a weird counterpart to Eggman as a character.
because Tails wasn't supposed to be Eggman's counterpart.
That's
Yeah,
Tails was added very late into development because
That's
everybody.
That's why his levels, I think, are probably the
Yeah.
slight knockoffs of the better Eggman levels.
And that's very much it, because Tails was not originally going to be in the game, but everyone lost their shit because, well, you got to play as Tails, and they're like, fuck. So they just added him as a really quick Eggman.
but here's the thing: is it also like fell in line with how Tails is developed in the comics.
That is fair.
So like, yeah, it seems arbitrary, but at the same time, like for me, it fell right in line because Tails was already heading down that road of like trying to delineate himself from Sonic. Because Tails, for a long time in the comics, wanted to be a Sonic clone, and as he grew in the comics, he's like, no, I'm a little bit more like technologically inclined, and I'm really interested in making these machines and these airplanes. And
Which
stuff.
worked. I think if they had more characters, more design on it, I think if Tails had been more of actually his plane had been flying and they had more of a flight element to it, I think I would have been like a lot of it in something.
Honestly,
There's early Rouge the Bat.
Oh, wow, that is very different.
I actually kind of like that design better
Yeah.
because it's the white fur. Yeah. Well, Shadow has yellow fur in the comics for some reason and his chest. So that's
Oh.
weird.
Yeah.
Well, he's got to have his chest hair.
I
He's
think
a full adult boy. Look at me.
I think I also would have liked it like if Tails wasn't in the mech. Like you don't have to have him flying around like his SA1 levels where they're all races, but I know it's weird. This game from 2001, take notes from the 2022 movie, but like maybe
is
give
a little
Tails
more of
like
his,
in
like,
Sonic the Hedgehog
yeah.
2 movie, give him a fucking gun, like give him all these.
Don't also forget that Sonic
And
had the
also,
Monkey King
Tails
at one
is
point.
controls really well when you go into the Chow
If you're
world.
not reading the comics,
Yeah,
you're
because
missing out.
it's basically just as SA1.
I noticed just how well Tails controls when you're in the Chow world. Like, he moves really well. His flight, everything, like, so, like, part of me playing, I goes, man, I kind of wish I got to control this character in the game. It didn't have to be a Sonic clone running through fast, but, like, because he controlled so well that I was like, I really would have liked to see more of, like, actually playing as Tails instead of just stuck to a mech suit. Now, on the opposite end of that, Eggman controls like ass in the Chow
my
world and
God.
looks awful.
He looks like a string puppet. He's so
No,
gangly.
he looks amazing.
I mean, I want to
Like-
see Jim Carrey run like that,
out
but
of all the characters in the game, Dr. Eggman running in the Chow world
is amazing.
in the KO world looks the sexiest character of all of them.
There's a mod that I saw that somebody took his model in that world and put it into City Escape.
Yeah,
where
so
you were going
he's
through
just,
City Escape.
so
as
he's
Eggman.
just running through City Escape.
Would play.
It's great. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, speaking of Eggman, yet another interesting development story. Kind of the last one I have, maybe. I don't know. I might remember one. There were originally only 3 playable characters in this game: Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman. Shadow and Rouge were not going to be playable, and as I've said before, Tails wasn't going to be either. Now, I'm 80% certain.
We understand.
Certain that Shadow and Rouge, that changed very quickly.
Very early on in
because
development.
I cannot imagine a Sonic Adventure 2 where you are not playing as Shadow.
Oh
and Rouge.
no!
But
I can imagine it not playing as Tails
I
because
wouldn't
he's
you can
play it.
see that though as they build the story.
Yeah, that's
Imagine if they started with City Escape. That's the first level they designed. I don't know if that is, but let's just imagine that for this scenario there. And then you see what Shadow's first level is, which is almost 3 Sonic levels later. The first level on the way to design, it does see like, okay, and he only has, I think, 1 that feels like that run to the end of it, where Sonic has a bunch. So it does feel like he was a later development add a bit. Maybe not super late, but like, okay, we're enough on the Sonic, let's go to this. Eggman's levels obviously feel more developed than Tails' levels. And the Knuckles levels, while there's not a tremendous delineation between Knuckles and Rouge, the Knuckles levels look better, like the whole world, and they are consistently bigger than the Rouge levels.
I would also say that I know on levels like that it's hard to have conveyance, but I will say the Knuckles levels feel like they have better conveyance than the Rouge
Yeah,
levels.
they feel. They said they feel like one of them was maybe developed a little later, so maybe didn't have as much development time. And I'm sure it wasn't like, oh my gosh, at the last minute they're adding Rouge. It doesn't feel like that, but it does feel like one was maybe spent 2+ years and one maybe only was 1.5 years. You know,
Something like that. Like I am not saying that they were late additions at all, but I'm just saying very early on in development, like first 6 months, if I had to guess,
they're like,
it was
oh well,
going to-
maybe we should add some more characters
yeah,
into this.
it was going to be just Sonic
And it might be
Knuckles
as they were kind of deciding out the story and how it played and what they were going to, as they were clearly trying to get a little bit away from the platforming of the time and trying to get more of the Sonic feel into the platforming, which I will say, can you say, works most of the time.
yeah.
Yeah, most of
it
the
feels
time it
really
does work.
good. This game is good. I know that there've been some nitpicks here and there, but this game is really good.
Look,
But our nitpicks are from like a modern context looking back.
Oh, yeah.
like if we're
Which is part of the fun of this
Yeah.
podcast,
Like-
is
like if-
modernly looking back at games.
like if we all went back to 2001, where I would be like 6, Mason would be a sperm.
I would be -2.
Wait, seriously?
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Oh, I was fucking kidding. God
No,
damn
yeah,
it.
I was born in
So
03.
it wouldn't even be a sperm.
The funny thing is, yeah. So because the what is it? The first one, the Sonic Adventure came out on 2001 on the Dreamcast, and then it came out
No.
literally 6 months later on the GameCube.
But again,
Wow.
the whole reason why I played Sonic Adventure is because I read the comics, which had the story laid out before the game came out.
So
How
I played
long
the
between
game.
Sonic games was would have been Sonic CD to Sonic Adventure?
no,
There's
because
one in between, isn't there?
because the release order was Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Sonic CD came out around the same time.
Oh, that's right.
Sonic-
Sonic CD's
and then
before.
Sonic
Then it was
3.
Sonic 3 and Knuckles around 1994. And then there was just a bunch of spin-offs until Sonic Adventure.
So that's a pretty big gap between mainline
Hey
stories.
man,
So
don't you discount them Genesis games or no those Game Gear games? So the Sonic Game Gear games are dope.
that
you
you
can't
pull it up and
forget
you can
Mean
play
Bean
for
Machine.
30 minutes before your batteries die. That thing sucks batteries
My-
like no lie.
Yeah, but it also
then-
had a backlight.
Oh, I love yo.
And then you look, Sonic 2 on the Game Gear has one of arguably the most traumatic bad endings of all time, which if you've never seen it, there's a good ending, bad ending, obviously. Good ending is where you get all the Chaos Emeralds. The bad ending, Sonic's just running alone after he beats Eggman, and he looks up to the stars, and Tails' face is just in the stars, and you're like, oh shit, did Tails fucking die? Oh my god. And you're
no
like,
way.
and you're like, my wingman.
There's no
what
way.
happened? I mean, obviously that bad ending is not canon, but it's also like, Tails, my bro, my buddy.
I would really like to see just like a whole Tails game.
I think and that's kind of going into the way when I was playing this and running through the Chow world with Tails. I would, because he controlled really well. I would like actually the way they had it set up. If you have a decent enough camera, legitimately, this Tails the way it is, that's where the platforming would have really worked.
Well,
Fred, we were talking about the Game Gear. There are 2 Tails games on the Game Gear.
Really? I did not know that.
There's one that's a very baby game. It's called Tails Sky Patrol. And then there is one Metroidvania. No, wait, not Metroidvania. That's one of the design. It's one where Tails, you're actually going through this level by level with Tails' gadgets called Tails Adventure.
I do remember that.
Yeah, I think you can play them on the Sonic Gems collection if you want to pay $80 goddamn dollars
well,
for
I
it.
still have my Game Gear, so maybe I'll
Well, fair enough. Yeah, I was gonna say.
I bet it'd be more expensive to find the original game than to find the Gems.
I don't know.
The Jim's collection is super rare.
Gems
oh,
collection's like $80. If that, it might have gone up. Now,
Yeah,
honestly.
thanks to my mom who was like, you know what, the Game Gear seems new enough. I want to go to Sears and buy that.
It's
Mom, it's
crazy how
2020.
it's crazy how the game. What's a Sears?
Where'd you find it?
I was like, Sears? Wait, Sears and games?
Fun story. I bought. This is not related, but you brought it there. Stores that basically don't exist and where you bought video games. I bought my Donkey Kong Country, my copy of that, at a Kmart for $75.
God,
Damn.
Jesus. Fuck.
Brand new.
Well, my Game Gear cost $200 when it came out.
Sega games were known as being kind of expensive, especially there.
I mean,
Saturn is really
We
known.
had tons of the Power Ranger game on there. Was dope.
Look, go to Japan if you want Saturn games. Because in Japan, I've told Sean this hundreds of times, but it's one of my favorite stories. In Japan, the Saturn was super popular, so
Yep.
they made a shit ton of games. So if you want Panzer Dragoon collection in the U.S., it is like $1,200. In Japan, it's like $50.
Dude, Panzer Dragoon is the stuff.
So kind of bringing it back to the original topic,
Basically, like,
Which
can we
seems
get
like-
back to
Hey,
talking
we're
about
still on Sega. Give us a break.
seems like many rabbit holes ago. I want to talk more. I just want to talk more about something that we kind of brought up kind of closer to the beginning. Can we talk about the music?
Yes.
I want to
yeah.
talk more about the music.
No, I don't
The
want to talk
music.
about that. Let's move on.
Oh, come on. No. This is like it's like the best part of this game is
John was moving around at the speed of sound. Got places to go.
Gotta follow his rainbow.
we're sticking with this rainbow, all right? I want to talk
Nope.
Go for it, Mason.
Go ahead.
Give us your soundtrack.
Because there's just something about the way that every single song works, A, within the context of the level, and B, as a song by itself.
Yeah,
Like, oh, man.
And then
her
using those
storyline,
themes
too.
from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
songs, and
exactly.
using those themes from the songs to then develop some of your level music and things from it. That while they're not the exact same, but using elements of it to keep every level from those 9 or 10 songs that they based around it as your level themes and your things like that works really, really well.
And-
You're always into it.
And the fact of the matter is, the levels, I mean, not all of them, but the character levels, the music is
It's
defined
playing.
of the character.
Yeah.
Sonic's music, it's rock. I mean, for 2/3 of the stages in this game is rock music. But
Yeah.
Sonic's is very kind of fast-paced, kind of brighter rock, if that makes any sense, whereas Shadows is a lot more darker.
Well,
It's
you got one is more like sort of like a hair metal rock is kind of what Sonic's is. So you get a lot of the more like those hi-hats and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas opposed to Shadows is a little bit more slight like heavy metal kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Eggman's has kind of a techno metal
Yeah.
vibe to it,
Yep.
which Tails does too, but I again view that as him being a very late development thing.
Tails also has the very, very upbeat music, though. Very, very, like, even though the
Yeah.
song is like, you're saying some depressing lyrics in here, but you're saying it happily, so it must be happy, right?
When I'm alone in my bed, I just can't help wishing, God.
But it's like said it happily, like, look at, it's like an anime opening theme, but like all like murders are happening.
So one of my favorite aspects of the Sonic Adventure 2 music, and really for both this and the first adventure as well, is that these two games birthed the introduction of the music group called Crush 40.
Yes.
That was Jun Tsunoe, the lead sound director's group that produced the music through this era. And where the name came from is my favorite part, is because around the times that those games were coming out, Jun Tsunoe turned 40, and he was like, I'm gonna crush 40. and I'm like, yes, I love that.
Oh, that's great.
It's a good name.
With Johnny Gargano?
Something like that. Yeah, it's the
yeah,
other-
Johnny G. Johnny G.
Yeah, is the
He's the lead vocalist. Fuck me, that man.
that man
that
can
man-
sing.
so
that man can
good.
That
sing.
guy's got
That man.
pipes.
That man has not lost a step.
And not only that, but Jun Tsunoe is a guitar god.
Jun Tsunoe is a god on guitar.
He's
Like, look,
fantastic.
Team Sonic Racing is not the best kart racer ever, but listen to that soundtrack. Not only does it
Yes.
have the first original Crush 40 song in years, Green Light Ride, which is very good, but Jun Tsunoe remixes like every track in that game.
I would
Perfection.
argue Team Sonic Racing is better than the other two racing games that Sonic has out.
I'm just saying, like, it's
But
the one-
compared
I'd probably
the
be
races around,
crucified
yeah.
for that because people are like, well, I like Transform. Like, I feel like Team Racing has better controls.
I mean, I like Team Racing a lot, but I also think it easily... It came out at the wrong time, and the online was just not good, and that's what a racing game lives and dies on nowadays.
Is it? Man, I've been playing racing games wrong.
Nowadays, I should say. Like,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sitting here playing my Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo, and I can't hear you.
where's the...
I'm in 1997 right now. What's this online gaming you're talking about? I'll go check my electronic mail.
Well, I think the first racing game I ever played was either Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, the original one on PC,
That's a good game.
or it was either that or Road Rash 2 on the PC, which is a vastly different game than the one on the Genesis.
Or Sonic R. No.
Yeah, that too. And you can't, I don't think you can kick people and kick police off to the side in Sonic Team Racing.
Not yet. Give it a few months.
You
When that
can't
PC
steal a
port comes
police's billy club and then beat him back with it.
I'm just imagining Sonic and GTA. Just it's that.
Hey, there is a mod
No,
for that.
we need
There
the
is a
Eggman.
mod.
The Eggman needs to be modded into GTA. Oh my god.
No,
I bet you there's one.
Matt, mod him into that one GTA 5 cutscene that got modded all the time, where he's yelling about the YES haircut, but
No,
it's just
get-
Eggman.
No, wait. Mod Eggman and Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Done.
just Eggman swinging around.
Shooting webs out there.
But instead of
Yes.
like making all the quips, Eggman's just yosh.
I want to see Eggman go toe to toe with with Kingpin.
Yes.
Fat fuck versus fat fuck. Let's go,
Oh
baby.
my
All
god.
systems, all power.
We've been a whole new game here.
Did anybody else have anything else to say on the soundtrack on it so we can get through Mason's?
That's really it.
Okay.
That's really it.
Yeah, I
first of all,
do. I do have
whoa.
one thing to say. Has nothing to do with the soundtrack. This is something you guys can't see, but the
John brought
original
toys.
Sonic plush that was made. The first Sonic plush that they made in like 93, 94. Yeah, my dad went away on a long business trip and came back and had to give me something. So,
He's cute.
Looks like something a grandma would knit
which
together.
is
Kinda
especially
does,
like
but it-
when you look
I
at
love
some of
it.
the modern ones that have been made.
Yeah.
Like the original one is I don't know, very interesting and
But
different.
it's nice. It's cute.
It kind of looks.
it.
I brought show and tell for
It kind of
everyone.
reminds me of like a Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with the puppets.
Yeah, it's just Mr. Yeah, it's a beautiful
What's-
day
yeah,
in the
if
neighborhood.
you look at, like,
Hello,
Sonic
Mr. Sonic.
Generations-
Hello.
Like,
Speaking,
That is very, that's
But
very generated.
I do have
yeah.
something
Oh,
on the
go ahead.
soundtrack.
we changed our mind. We don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no. I like most of the character themes in this game. I mean, the fact of the matter is, they're all pretty decent. Knuckles is funny. Like
yeah.
the fact of the matter is, "Unknown from Emmy" is not a great song, and the rapper who did I wonder if it's the rapper who did that or the rapper who did the level themes. I don't know if they're the same one.
I think
they
it's
are.
because there's only one credited. Whenever you're finished, I do have a funny thing about him.
Is it the fact that he tells people to kill themselves on social media?
Well, it's that. But no, here's the funny thing.
like
about
he
so,
unironically tells people just
so
fucking
the
kill yourself.
so the guy who did the Knuckles raps, which are all fantastic in my opinion, is a gentleman by
Says a
the
white man.
yeah, Rouge, she's sexy and smooth.
he's a man that goes by the name of Hunted P, and two funny things about him. First off, if you look at the credits, the final credits of Sonic Adventure 2, he is credited as 100p and not
100p.
HUNNIDP, which is how his name is actually pronounced. But the other funny thing is, years and years after he did that, like decades after all of that, when he wasn't really relevant anymore, he went on Twitter and was like, "I was not fully compensated for my work on Sonic Adventure 2." It's like as like a final gasp of relevance.
And nobody cared.
oh god.
But yeah,
thing I did.
but yeah,
Yeah.
like Knuckles' theme is, like I said, it's not great, but it's catchy, and that's kind of all that matters. Tails' and Sonic's theme. I prefer the SA1 mixes personally, but they're still really damn good. Rouge's theme I love. I love Fly and Freedom because I love jazz and her and her
like
level
jazz.
theme.
Anyway, sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Well, her and Jazz makes sense because Rouge the Bat reminds me a lot of Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop.
See, I was thinking Catwoman, but that might be because I'm not a weeb. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
But I say that, and I've been obsessed with Dragon Ball lately, so I'm
Yeah,
a fucking
buddy.
so I'm a fucking liar. But the best theme in the game is Eggman's. I don't care. I know that might be a spicy take, but the best theme in the game is Eggman's. Like
Good. Eggman's theme is good.
Yeah,
And
and-
it not to say that any of them have aged
I mean-
poorly.
I mean-
it has aged, I think, better than any of the other ones in a lot of ways.
I mean, I say best character theme. The best song in the game is Live and Learn.
Yes, Live and
like-
Learn's the best song.
I
like,
would say
easily.
that this all has some relevance because I don't know about you guys, but I've been seeing a lot of like memes that have been going around like showing like various movies that have come out recently, being like, this is this movie if it came out in like 2007 or whatever, and it has like the
Yeah, and it has the
Evanescence or
has
whatever
Evanescence or
sound.
Linkin Park or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like, I feel like
Yes.
this particular topic is really
Yes.
relevant.
Yeah.
We're talking about, man, that stuff still slapped, and like,
It-
yeah, everyone's doing it now.
Yeah,
Look.
but the best character theme is Eggman's. The worst ones is Shadows, in my opinion. I don't really care for Throw It All Away.
It's fine, but I can see that it just it doesn't stick like the other ones.
Yeah, and
oh boy.
Oh no, he's
all right. So Sean knows about this. I don't know if I'm actually being caught on the mic because I'm backing away because I don't want to be attacked.
here's a projector.
Okay.
Who wants a projector?
I'm not a big fan of Shadow. Just in general, I'm not big on Shadow.
Yeah, I'm not coming back.
I'm just
Bold statement.
and
Cox gun, climbs on motorcycle, drives toward Thomas.
yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog himself bursts through the wall. Oh shit, that's cool. You said you weren't a fan. Ah, God, no.
Take that.
Chaos control him! Chaos control him!
But like, look, okay. I will say he's probably the best in this game because he's really good in this game. He has a really good story, but it's a story that should have ended here.
And that was actually that was
it was originally the plan.
intent, because he
the
dies.
Yeah, the
air
plan
quotes, at the end.
was for Shadow to stay dead. But the fact of the matter is, he was so damn popular that they brought him back in Heroes 2 years later. And look, I'm I'm not saying it ruined the character, but after he came back, I just started caring less and less and less about him until now. He is my least favorite hedgehog in the franchise.
Wow.
Now, see, I wonder if some of this is because, like, my relationship to Shadow has a lot more story behind it.
And that could be the case, but it's also like
My relationship to Shadow is that Shadow the Hedgehog slaps.
that's a fucking line, you know.
No, I know. That game's awful, and I can't wait to play it.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh,
see,
man.
if you look at his story in the comics, he's a super sympathetic character.
Oh no, I'm not.
I mean, you're talking about a character that was made by basically Robotnik's grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like comes into existence, and it has to like.
Which is probably how they're going to explain Shadow and not having Jim Carrey in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's probably going to be Robotnik's grandfather being the character in
Yeah,
this.
so well,
It will be Robotnik. It will be Robotnik's grandfather. I personally want Shadow to be the main villain of.
Yeah,
the
I don't want them to pull another what they did with the last character, with the last one.
I don't want him to be like, oh, he's. I don't want him to pull a Knuckles where he's like, oh, he's good, but he's like redeemed at the end. He's the bad guy, but he's redeemed at the end.
You can redeem him in 4. That's fine.
But
redeem him
Shadow-
in 4, or like make Shadow like. At least if you do redeem him, don't make him like live with Sonic and Tails and Knuckles.
No, so like
have Shadow be like, all right, we saved the day. Cool, you want to come home? Nah, fuck you, and teleport away.
Well, and see,
Like,
that's pretty germane to how the comics work. So, like, Shadow eventually becomes a quote unquote friendly with Sonic, but is never like fully around him the way Knuckles is. Like, he doesn't come to that same relationship with Sonic that Knuckles does.
and that is probably the best thing you can do with Shadow. I say I'm not a big fan of Shadow. I'm giving all the character analysis on him. I lied. No. This was for
I
clicks.
just want him to be better.
This is for
Clickbait,
this is
clickbait,
this is for
clickbait.
clicks, baby.
Stood away from the table and everything, and that was all for show, wasn't it?
Well, we got to get the article titled "Wrong Man."
Yeah, wrong man has wrong opinion.
Now throw bananas at him.
Thomas
but-
hates Shadow, and he's not talking about Peter Pan.
But yeah, Shadow does have admittedly one of my favorite parts in the comics. I mean, he has a bunch of good lines in the comics, but one of my favorite ones is he beats the shit out of Bean the Dynamite from Sonic the Fighters.
Yeah.
And he just holds him up saying, "Happy birthday, Hedgehog, I cleaned your yard."
Amazing.
The Shadow's really good in the comics.
Well, have either of you like, or has anyone read like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I'm
like-
vaguely familiar with it.
So on the first book, there's this scene where like they have this ship that runs on an improbability drive where like anything can happen. So they use it and then they come back to the same spot, and these two missiles that were going to blow them up. One turns into a bowl of petunias, and the other one turns into a large sperm whale that then has to like contemplate its entire existence and self-worth before it like splats on the ground.
Oh Jesus!
And that's Shadow. But see, that's what's great about Shadow. It's like he came into existence basically the same way as the sperm whale, and is figuring out like his own personal existence from a very, very nihilistic perspective.
Before he splats on the
Before
ground.
he splats on the ground.
Quite literally.
Yeah, like it's, I don't know, it's that's what's always like I've really appreciated about him in the comics is that he's really gone through that development, and you get hints of that in the game, and there's like little like sugar drops of all of that stuff, but they never hit it hard as you see in the exact same issue where they're going over the same origin story. It is much more emotional in the comic and a much more gratifying to be able to see all that play out, which is, again, something that I feel like video games will be able to drag out in more modern storytellings if they revisit something like that.
And that
Revisit. That can lead us right to our final questions here. You know,
but real quickly before we get to that,
basically we're at an hour and a half.
here's the thing. This will be really quick. I swear. Bringing up the fact that he does fly to the ground. Both Sonic and Shadow do the same final boss fight. Why does Shadow die?
Because he can't control the Chaos Emeralds as
Yeah,
much.
because look,
okay.
they say you have to be in the boss fight for a while before you say it. It's like damn near like the time limit. But
He
it is
has
one of
his
my favorite-
Vegeta to Goku at the end of the arc where he
Very-
basically goes,
very
"Oh
much.
wow, Sonic, you're more powerful than
Yeah,
me."
he straight up says
that's a great,
he straight up says
analogy.
like he straight up Shadow and Sonic are both beating the shit out of BioLizard, and Shadow goes, Sonic, I know who the ultimate life form is now. It's you.
Oh,
Because
wow.
he goes like,
Yeah.
shit, I am not good enough. I am not strong enough. You are more powerful than me.
And Shadow hates admitting that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Like,
because he's
Just
because
because
he's
he admits it,
'cause
he
he's Vegeta.
still resents Sonic.
because he's Vegeta.
Yeah.
Like it's very but
I mean, Sonic borrowing from Dragon Ball? No, they would never ever do that.
what a surprise.
Now that that's cleared up, now we can.
On every episode of this podcast, we like to ask 2 important questions of every game. And our first one is, how does this game hold up?
I mean, I think Mason especially went on the whole tirade about the camera, but that is really the main
I have also gone on the tirade of the
yeah,
camera.
you all of us have gone on the tirade about the camera.
It hasn't aged well, but it hasn't aged, and yet it kind of has. in a
Yeah,
way.
that's kind of
It-
where I'm at. It holds up as
I
a game
think
of its
I-
time. Its story,
Yes.
its characters, and a lot of the gameplay holds up fine. The problem comes is, in a modern look at things, the camera and the controls do not hold up.
Which are just development issues
Yep.
that
I was
plagued
gonna say, 'cause
everything at the time.
I was gonna say I think Mason did put it best, where it both does and doesn't hold
Yep.
up at the same time.
Yeah.
and I think it's appropriate to parse that out.
And
Yeah.
second main question we ask every time is, would this game deserve a reimagining or a remake in a modern setting?
Yes.
Here's what I'll say about that. Recently, Nintendo Online has started doing this thing that if you're sign up, you can play. It's kind of like the virtual console thing. You can go back and you can play games from certain consoles. I think right now they're up to the N64 and the Genesis. And I want to say to the one Nintendo employee who's listening, and I know he's listening. I know for a fact that in the future you're going to start adding GameCube games. Add the adventure ports. Add them.
Both of them.
Both
yes.
of them. Please. That would be
And-
amazing.
And like, there is also it's been like, people have wanted it for a while. Izuka has straight up said like, no, we're not fucking doing it. But a lot of people have wanted an SA1 and SA2 remake, but like combined.
I would
like Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, Spyro Reignited Trilogy style.
What I actually would like is actually something John hinted on a little earlier in it. I would like a full-scale reimagining. So kind of what Final Fantasy VII Remake has done, in that it plays through all the same beats, but it expands on things. And I think because in the modern setting, you could really expand on the story, which is the best part of this game. The best part of this game is the story. And if you were going through the story while keeping a lot of the levels and things similar enough that you're familiar in it, but giving you a new experience, that is what I would like to see again. Because I would like, as I said, trying to experience through the story here, despite knowing the whole story and everything about it, I found myself being a little disjointed in the way they tried to tell it. And considering they have the comics, they have stuff that has come after, they've adapted into into Sonic X later on, you could tell a full story and give this story the gravity I think it would deserve in a full game.
Especially like you bring up Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I'm just imagining like how cool would that be? Like if Sonic and they're like going through this game and they're doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden something changes. Like Shadow turns super at one point, and before Sonic does, and he just kicks Sonic's ass. And it's like, oh shit! And then Shadow like sees himself die or whatever in the future, and he's like, wait, what the fuck? Like just
Yeah.
Or maybe
imagine
even you bring back those ideas of how you develop characters. You can fully develop Tails to more what you wanted, or maybe you're not worried about making one-to-one clones of everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of delineation in the characters more.
Maybe
Maybe
like give Knuckles more of a beat 'em up element than
Yeah.
a treasure hunting element.
Yes.
Maybe you bring in some of the other characters that they cut in there. I don't know if anybody really wants more Amy levels, but could
I
you?
do.
Thomas, To the one Sega employee who is listening, we know they are. Thomas wants Amy levels. Get on it.
I don't want Amy levels. I want Bunny Robot levels.
Oh, dude, that'd actually be
Maybe
fucking badass.
maybe you bring characters. You don't need to bring all the characters in, but like maybe there's something where there's more. You have some Mecha Sonic. Maybe there's or Metal Sonic. You know, maybe you have some.
Mecha Sonic's a different character.
Yeah, I realized
That's
immediately.
different.
The moment I said it was a different character.
That's from the 48-page special.
Yeah, yeah.
I would
remember
like
that.
I would like them to really reimagine the way this story is told, because this story is really good, and it is why people gravitated to this game and why they still talk about this game in both the franchise. Why Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, is probably going to be semi-based on this game.
It's probably going to be
the game
mostly
that has
SA2.
it is the story that has stood the test of time in Sonic.
It's probably Sonic 3 is probably going to mostly be SA2 based if I had to guess, which is why I think they should include Amy because she's actually very important to Shadow's development in this game.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But I will say, if they do a remake, because Sonic Frontiers is coming out, which, hey, this dates the podcast. Sonic Frontiers is coming out. Ian Flynn is writing it,
Yes.
which Ian Flynn is the current writer of the comics.
Well, he's been the writer
Well, he's been the writer since like 2006.
since actually
he's-
before that, because he's been writing since Archie comics.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's 2006 is when he started writing Archie, and he's still going for IDW. Simply put, the man knows his shit.
Yes.
And so just getting him to rewrite this story, reimagine it,
Totally
maybe
agree.
get the original writers as well to peak. It'd be perfect.
Yeah. I would say I do not want a reimagining. I do not want a remake. I want something different. Like
That's fair.
so, and that may be like maybe a harsh opinion, but like it's great. It is what it is. It's done. But that doesn't mean that you can't create or build off of it, like everyone's mentioned before. And I that's what I want. And maybe Sonic Frontiers will bring some of that out. Maybe it won't. But like I want a Sonic story that has Interjack in it, which I don't. If people aren't as familiar, like Interjack is this echidna super god that like Knuckles eventually becomes.
And then his dad has to die to save him.
Yeah, like I want that the Dark Brotherhood story of the Knuckles universe as well. I want Tales Down Under storylines in there where he goes to like Australia and meets his own posse. I want Icus Nagus. I want the Upside Down worlds. I want all of the bizarreness that happened in the comics to culminate in one bitch ass Sonic game.
I kind of feel like
I'd be fine with just including Bunny Rabbit.
Yes,
that's
true.
I kind of feel like since
Since she's been around longer than Amy Rose.
I mean, I like Amy, but also Bunny Rabbit is one of the best Sonic characters. and
Agreed.
I will not be
Totally
denied.
agree. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, no, you guys are fine. I feel like since the inception of the comics, the games have been kind of afraid to integrate themselves with it. They've kind of distanced themselves as much as they can.
That's
And to
because of Shadow the Hedgehog.
To the
Yeah, it really
same
is.
to the same Sega employee, don't be afraid to mix in things from the comics. We'll be okay with it.
Well,
you don't need to invent new
can't-
characters.
They can't do stuff from the earlier comics because, for those who don't know,
Oh yeah, that lawsuit
yeah,
that
that
happened.
big lawsuit with Ken Penders.
Yeah.
By the way, fuck Ken Penders.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whole other subject. This podcast
But they
already
could
real
still
long.
bring him in on it, like.
Oh no, I'm not gonna say they can't.
So that at least they could get some of the copyrights that he ended up owning.
I'm not gonna say they couldn't. Again, Bunny Rabbit isn't his creation. I'd love to see her be
Yeah,
brought
because
in.
Bunny Rabbit's been there since like the beginning.
Yeah. So
I have like the first novel that they
was gonna
made
say she-
of like a kid's book that has like is basically issue 0.
yeah, she's been in there. So
Yeah.
it'd be cool. Yeah.
So if you can't tell, we all really love Sonic here. This is a game that is near and dear to all of our hearts in different ways. So what do you guys think about this game? Let us know. Leave a review specifically on Apple iTunes. You can type some words in there, and
Black.
you can be you can be as mean to us as you want, as long as you give us 5 stars. You can tell us we suck and give us 5 stars, we will say thank you, sir.
Make sure
How
you
dare
spell
Tom-
it with an X.
How dare
Exactly.
Thomas doesn't like Shadow? Fuck him, fuck him, fuck him. 5 stars.
From Shadow Fan 69.
Yeah, from Shadow Fan 42069.
But, you know,
I think I've
check
seen
us
that
out on
Rule
all of
34
our
user.
platforms. Apple iTunes. If you're on Spotify, give us that follow. I think it's a like or
I think
something
it's
on
like
it.
or
It's a heart.
download.
It's a heart. Tell us that you know that you love us. Amazon Music, same sort of thing. Let us know. We will be back with a next episode where we decide to try something a little bit different. So thank you all for tuning in,
Ominous.
and have a good night.